Chapter 9, Part 9. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about skeletal muscle physiology as far as the whole muscle. So a muscle twitch is a muscle contraction in response to a stimulus that causes an action potential in one or more muscle fibers. There's a couple different phases. There's lag or latent phase, contraction, and relaxation. So we're going to move on to types of muscle contractions. So we have isometric and isotonic contractions. And isometric is when there's no change in length, but the tension increases. An example of that could be the posture muscles of the body. Isotonic contractions is an actual change in length, but the tension is constant. So we have concentric and eccentric. And honestly, pictures do a lot more for me with these terms. So the one that I just talked about, isotonic contractions and concentric and eccentric contractions, are shown here. So in these pictures, or isotonic anyway, is shown here. So when we talk about isotonic contractions, we're talking about the movement of a muscle. So the muscle either shortens or lengthens. So eccentric is when we are holding, let's say, a heavy weight or a weighted ball, and we extend our arm out. Okay, extension is the lengthening of a muscle. In concentric, it is when the muscle actually shortens and does work. So it is when you would take that weighted ball and kind of flex your arm up. So that's kind of simply put, not going too deep into this. Isometric is basically tension builds, but the muscle doesn't shorten or lengthen. And I usually give the example of like holding heavy grocery bags, because how many of us, when we go grocery shopping, we want to make one trip from the car to the house, right? So we carry, 14 bags in each hand. Of course, it's a little different now that most places are just using paper because, the plastic bags were easier to hold this way. But anyway, so isometric contractions are when the muscle isn't really changing in length, but it is working, if you will. And an example would be maintaining posture. So a motor unit, you've heard, probably if you've watched any of the videos, you may have heard speak of motor unit. So a motor unit is a single motor neuron, and all the muscle fibers it innervates or physically serves. So you have one motor unit and all the muscle fibers that are served by it. So, of course, large muscles have motor units with many muscle fibers, and small muscles that make delicate movements contain motor units with few muscle fibers. So, force of contraction in individual muscle fibers. So we have TREP, which is a graded response. It occurs in muscles that are rested for a prolonged period, and then each subsequent contraction is stronger than the previous until all equal after a few stimuli. So the reasoning behind this is basically that with the initial graded response, or the initial stimuli, there's calcium that's released, and that calcium isn't all drawn back into this sarcoplasmic reticulum. So some of that calcium is still readily available. So basically each consecutive stimulus is stronger until it gets to a point where it's constant. So TREP, I think in German, is step. So it's like a stepping up of stimulus strength until you get to the top. So as the frequency of an action potential increases further, contraction occurs with greater force. So we have wave summation. So just know these as being able to define these. You don't have to necessarily explain these in depth. So wave summation is muscle and tension increases as contraction frequencies increase. And incomplete tetanus, the muscle fibers partially relax between those contractions. And then complete tetanus, there's no relaxation. So we have different types of muscle fibers. We have slow twitch fibers, which are referred to as type 1, and fast twitch fibers, which are referred to as type 2. Slow twitch contract slowly. They're smaller. They have a better blood supply. There's more mitochondria. And these guys, these slow twitch fibers, are fatigue resistant in that they can go for longer periods. And you think of them as something like muscles that you use just to stroll and walk, and your posture muscles, muscles that you use to sit. All right. So these have large amounts of myoglobin, which make them darker. An example, if you're looking at any particular cut of meat, like for chicken, it's dark meat chicken. Lighter, the white meat in chicken is fast twitch or type 2 muscle fibers. These respond much more rapidly. They contain myosin that can break down ATP more rapidly than they contain more myosin than that can break down ATP more rapidly than in type 1. There is less blood supply in these fast twitch type 2 fibers. And examples for where the fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers would be located would be in the lower limbs of a sprinter. And like I said, in the white meat of chicken. So moving forward, muscle, let me just say one more thing about this. These are going to be more readily fatigued, right? So sprinters, they can sprint. They go for short periods, and then their muscles are a little fatigued, and then they stop. Whereas those slow twitch, like I said before, are fatigue resistant. They can go for a long, long period. Somebody that is really good for endurance running, doing the 100-mile or 100-kilometer run, are going to be more likely to have more of these slow twitch fibers in their legs. And everybody's different. So somebody that is a really great sprinter will have those more of those fast twitch fibers in their lower limbs. I am not a sprinter. I am not a long distance runner, so I don't know what I have in my legs. All right, so most muscles have both types, but varies for each person. Effects of exercise will cause a change in the size of muscle fibers. So somebody that is doing a lot of exercise, a lot of weight training, a lot of running, we're gonna refer to their muscles as more hypertrophy. So there's an increase in muscle fibers. I'm sorry, in myofibrils, not an increase in necessarily muscle fibers. There will be a change in size in the muscle fibers. I apologize for that misspeaking there. So with hypertrophy comes an increase in strength, better coordination of muscles, increase of production of metabolic enzymes, better circulation, and less restriction by fat. Atrophy is a decrease in muscle size due to less movement, less use. Heat production, exercise, the metabolic rate and heat production will increase. Post-exercise, metabolic rate stays high due to oxygen debt. So it takes some time for the muscles to kind of, get the oxygen it needs to replenish it. Excess heat lost because of vasodilation and sweating. And also shivering is an uncoordinated contraction of muscle fibers resulting in shaking and heat production. So I'm going to stop here and pick up on this last little bit in the last installment for Chapter 9.